Joe Rogan called it one of the greatest caps to a career of all time. Not just one of the greatest upsets. One of the greatest endings to a fighter's story. And when you sit with that for a moment, when you trace the full arc of Justin Gaethje from his UFC debut throwing himself at Michael Johnson with no regard for personal safety, through the Khabib submission, through the Oliveira finish, through the Max Holloway knockout that was itself supposed to signal the end of his relevance at the highest level, the weight of what happened on the White House lawn becomes genuinely difficult to overstate. A man who had been counted out repeatedly, who had absorbed more punishment in more brutal fights than almost anyone in the division, who showed up as a 5-1 underdog against the most dominant champion of the new generation, and walked out as the undisputed lightweight champion of the world. That story does not get written very often. And the details of how it got written tell you everything about what separates Justin Gaethje from the fighters who have come before him and will come after. The tactical picture of the fight is now clear in a way that was not fully apparent in the immediate emotional aftermath. Rogan identified the critical moment that determined the trajectory of everything that followed, and it was not a punch or a kick. It was the minute between rounds 3 and 4 when the ringside doctor appeared to want to stop the fight and referee Mark Goddard overruled him. Goddard assessed both fighters, recognized that both men wanted to continue, and made the call that kept the fight alive. Daniel Cormier praised that decision publicly. He called the doctor inexperienced and said Goddard's judgment was correct. Whether that specific minute changed the outcome is impossible to know with certainty, but the argument can be made that it was a turning point in Gaethje's favor. He had survived the most dangerous period of the fight, the second round when Topuria came closest to the finish, and that extra minute of recovery between rounds gave him the ability to come out in round 4 and continue the work that had been building. By that point, Topuria could barely see out of either eye. Gaethje was, by most accounts, getting stronger. Gaethje's own post-fight account is the most important source for understanding the fight from inside the cage. He said Topuria was faster than expected. He said the body shots were crazy. He acknowledged that Topuria rocked him, that he genuinely did not know how he stayed away from some of those shots. And then he said the thing that had been the spine of his pre-fight mindset made real in real time. When Topuria did not get the finish at the end of the second round, it took his spirit. Gaethje had predicted this moment in the press conference. He had said that when round 2 arrives and the guaranteed first-round knockout has not happened, Topuria is going to be like what the... When round 3 arrives, same thing. He said it and it happened. The champion who had publicly committed to a specific and dramatic outcome was confronted by a reality that diverged from that commitment, and the divergence cost him something psychological that the physical damage then compounded. Gaethje's description of the specific moment he knew the fight had turned is the most precise piece of tactical information available from the event. He said he never felt Topuria was broken. He was so dangerous throughout. But in the third round, when he started landing his jabs and Topuria started finding his back foot, he knew something was different. A fighter finding his back foot involuntarily is the physical expression of a psychological shift. It means the pressure has become something to manage rather than something to impose. Topuria had built his entire championship identity on being the man who imposed pressure, who came forward, who made opponents react. When Gaethje's jab started landing in the third and fourth rounds and Topuria began backing up, the inversion of that dynamic was visible and Gaethje recognized it immediately. That is what Joe Rogan meant when he said Justin took his soul. The competitive identity that Topuria had constructed, and the specific fight week guarantee that had expressed it most dramatically, was being dismantled round by round, and both men could feel it happening. The blood detail is the most unexpected piece of post-fight analysis, and it came from Gaethje himself. He said Topuria was so concerned about the blood from the cut that immediately after Gaethje landed the uppercut that opened him, Topuria started repeatedly touching the cut, checking it, monitoring it. That is not the behavior of a fighter who has been in situations where his face has been genuinely damaged over multiple rounds. It is the behavior of a fighter experiencing that specific kind of crisis for the first time and not having a pre-established psychological response to it. Conor McGregor made the same observation from a different angle. He said Topuria had never had it properly put on him in the gym, that you need to pay sparring partners to drop you so that you have the psychological architecture built for the moment when it happens in a real fight. Whether McGregor's specific claim about Topuria's gym preparation is accurate is not something anyone outside the camp can verify. But the behavioral evidence in the fight, the touching of the cut, the difficulty processing the reality that the guaranteed finish was not coming, suggests that the experience of sustained serious damage over multiple championship rounds was genuinely new for Topuria in a way it has never been for Gaethje. The Daniel Cormier observation about Topuria's corner stoppage error is worth examining carefully. Cormier pointed out that at the end of round 4, Topuria shot a takedown attempt. Gaethje defended it. In the final 10 seconds of the round, Gaethje kneed Topuria in the body while Topuria was in the clinch. Topuria's left hand immediately went back to protect his ribs, a reflexive response to serious body pain. The round ended almost immediately after. When Topuria went back to the corner, the combination of both eyes being closed and the rib injury from that final knee was what produced the corner stoppage. Cormier said Topuria would look back and question why he attempted a takedown in the final seconds of round 4, what was gained from that attempt, given that he had no meaningful ground game advantage and the attempt put him in the precise position to absorb the body shot that may have been the physical final straw. It is the kind of tactical error that only becomes visible in retrospect, and it is consistent with a broader pattern of a fighter whose game plan had broken down entirely and who was improvising without a framework. The fight was Gaethje winning on the scorecards, which is the detail that most of the emotional reaction coverage has failed to fully emphasize. MMA Guru scored it 3-1 for Gaethje. The first round was clearly Gaethje's. He landed the jabs that started closing Topuria's right eye, he used his length, he controlled the distance. The second round was Topuria's. The body shots were landing, Gaethje was visibly hurt at moments, the finish was close. The third round returned to Gaethje as the damage accumulated and Topuria's punch output declined. The fourth round was Gaethje's to the point where the corner made the decision rather than send Topuria out for a fifth. This was not a fight that was decided by one punch or one moment of chaos. It was a fight that was decided across 4 rounds by a man who was fighting at a higher tactical level than the champion, while simultaneously absorbing the champion's best output without going away. The Paddy Pimblett argument, the one that circulated during the post-fight period suggesting Pimblett beats Gaethje easily because Gaethje's grappling is inferior, is worth addressing directly because it generated significant debate. Rogan pushed back hard in the post-fight conversation. Gaethje is a Division I wrestler. He chooses not to use his wrestling because his competitive identity is built around the striking battle. That is a stylistic preference, not a capability gap. The argument that Pimblett submits Gaethje because Gaethje cannot grapple misunderstands the sport fundamentally. A fighter who chooses to stand does not lose the ability to fight off his back or defend takedowns. What Gaethje loses when he chooses to stand is the ability to submit his opponent, but his ability to defend submission attempts against Pimblett, who is not an elite wrestler or submission specialist against genuinely high-level opposition, is a very different question from whether he would be vulnerable to it. The celebration of Gaethje's victory from across the sport has been remarkable in its consistency. Fighters, analysts, and observers who had different predictions and different investments in the outcome all arrived at the same place. This was one of the greatest fights ever staged, and the result was one of the sport's most meaningful stories. Joe Rogan said not only was it one of the greatest upsets of all time but one of the greatest caps to a career of all time. Jorge Masvidal said it ranks as one of the greatest fights he had seen since he was 12 years old watching MMA. Francis Ngannou said never count Justin out. Ali Abdelaziz said on any given night, anybody can lose. The consensus from people who have been inside the sport at its highest levels is that what happened at the White House was exceptional by every available measure. For Topuria, the path forward requires processing things that have no precedent in his professional career. He has never lost. He has never been visibly and comprehensively outworked. He has never had his spirit taken in the way Gaethje described taking it. The first loss of a professional career that has been entirely defined by winning, on the biggest stage the sport has ever provided, with a broken orbital bone and damaged ribs as the physical evidence of what the night cost him. That is the specific form of adversity that either breaks a fighter's competitive identity permanently or forces a reconstruction of it that produces something stronger. Every piece of evidence available about who Ilia Topuria is as a competitor suggests the second outcome is far more likely. His post-fight statement was not the statement of a man who is broken. The no excuses acknowledgement, the promise to return stronger and wiser, the specific statement that this story between them is far from over. These are the words of a man who has processed the loss accurately and begun orienting toward what comes next. What comes next for Gaethje is the question that the post-fight period has not yet resolved. The conversation with his mother about retirement is real. The neurological cost of the career he has had is real. The achievement of the undisputed title at 38 years old after everything he has been through is real. If this is the last time Justin Gaethje competes in the Octagon, he goes out as the most decorated version of himself available, the man who ended Ilia Topuria's undefeated streak on the biggest card in UFC history, who won the performance and fight of the night bonuses simultaneously, who delivered exactly what he promised when he said he was going to dig deep and push through anything the fight required. Joe Rogan said it might be one of the greatest caps to a career of all time. That framing does not require retirement to be true. But if retirement is what comes next, it is hard to imagine a more complete ending.